G'day and welcome back to MotoringBox. On today's episode, I'm going to show you the only proper way that you can add an auxiliary connection or even Bluetooth audio streaming to the head unit of your BA or BF Falcon. Stick around. Now before we get started, I know what some of you are thinking. Sean, why the hell are you making a video about this? After all, every single BA or BF Falcon has an auxiliary port under the dashboard. All you need to do is jump on eBay, get a $20 or $30 adapter, plug it in, press a button on your head unit, and you've got an auxiliary connection ready to go. But unfortunately, it's not really that simple, because if you go to plug your phone into that new auxiliary connection, you'll find that the signal is actually really quiet. Usually I listen to the radio or CD on this car at a volume level of around, say, 5 to 10. But when I used a BA-BF Bluetooth adapter, which I got off eBay, I had to turn the volume up to about 20 to get the volume levels roughly where I like to listen to the music at. Now, if you used an auxiliary adapter, which you can also get on eBay slightly cheaper, you would have the same problem. It's going to be really quiet and the audio quality doesn't really sound that great. And another unfortunate byproduct of having the volume turned up that much higher is you can even hear a bit of feedback noise from the engine. I'm sure you know the noise I'm talking about. It's kind of like an audio feedback whine, and it rises and falls with the RPMs of your engine, which is a really terrible thing. It really ruins the sound. So how do we fix this problem? Well, as luck would have it, I've got a solution. So let's head back to the garage and I'll give you all the details. Now, if any of you guys are still confused as to what the hell I'm talking about, here is the simple explanation. Behind the fuse panel of every single BA or BF Falcon, there is an auxiliary connector, and it's not your typical AUX connector, which is like a headphone jack and a socket. It's a proprietary setup, and there are adapters you can purchase from eBay, which turns it into a regular auxiliary port, or you can get a Bluetooth version, like the one I've got here, which plugs into the existing connection and lets you run Bluetooth through the stereo of your Falcon. And this is actually what I've been doing for the last couple of months without you guys realizing it. But I'm here to tell you today that this setup is shit. Because as I mentioned in the opening of this video, you have to turn the volume to roughly double what you would expect it to be if you were playing radio or a CD. And the sound quality as well sounds shit. And you can hear that noise, that sort of feedback sound, the whine that rises and falls with the RPM of the engine. So look, on its own, I think it's a really terrible setup. But luckily there is a solution, and it comes from a company called ASL Automedia. So this actually does a couple of things. The first thing is it's an amplifier. So there's a little gain screw on the end, and what this lets you do is turn the gain up and down until you can match the volume exactly with the level of your radio, CD, everything else. And the second function this thing actually performs is it's a line conditioner. And what that means is it's kind of a filter which gets rid of any feedback or noise which is in the background of the audio. So I reckon this is going to solve our problems, hopefully. Also included in the pack is the wiring loom to connect it up to your car. So we do have the auxiliary connection here which plugs in up behind the fuse panel. We've got a traditional auxiliary port, which is fantastic. And I believe some of these other connectors connect up to different plugs behind the fuse panel, which are also there to provide power and whatever else this line conditioner box needs. Also included in the pack is an auxiliary expandable cable and a traditional iPhone connector, which is only so slightly out of date now, so we're not going to need that. I'm not even an Apple user anyway. So what this kit actually enables you to do is to get an auxiliary connection, a traditional style auxiliary connection, into your Falcon. But I'm going to take it one step further, because I don't know about you, but I hate plugging a phone into an auxiliary port. I would prefer to use Bluetooth. So what I'm actually going to do is, rather than throw out this existing Bluetooth adapter, which I've already got installed, I'm actually going to hack off this proprietary connector and turn it into a traditional 3.5mm auxiliary plug. And that should enable me to plug it into this 3.5mm auxiliary receiver onto the new ASL Automedia loom. So hopefully the end result will be that I will have a Bluetooth connection in my car, but also running at the correct volume and without that audio feedback noise which was in the background. That is the plan anyway, so let's get this thing installed and I'll see if my assumptions turn out to be correct. Installing the ASL Automedia auxiliary and line conditioner box is actually incredibly easy. All you need to do is take a look up behind your fuse panel and you'll see the white auxiliary connector. And also the blue connector is what we need to plug in to get our power. It's actually really hard to see what's going on up here, so you sort of have to fumble your way through the darkness and get the auxiliary connectors lined up before clicking them into place. We then need to do pretty much exactly the same thing with the blue power connector. So what we need to do here is insert the female side of the ASL loom onto the male plug connector, and the ASL loom actually has an additional male connector, meaning that after you install this ASL Automedia box, there is still a male connector free if you need to connect anything else to it. Alright, so now that I've got this ASL Automedia module connected into both the power and the auxiliary outlets, we should be able to test the auxiliary connection using this hardwired 3.5mm port. And of course I can use this included extendable 3.5mm auxiliary cable. So we'll put that down there and then we'll connect the other end to our phone. So what I'm going to do first is turn the radio on. And it gives us an idea of what the volume level on the radio sounds like. Of course we want to try and match the volume level from the radio to the auxiliary connection. So if you've never used an auxiliary adapter on your Falcon before, you can actually access the auxiliary sound by holding down the AM button. Once you do that, it'll swap your head unit into auxiliary mode. And if we then get our phone and try and play a track, it's working. And while the song is playing, if I swap back to the FM band, the volume of the radio does seem to be roughly equivalent with the sound from the auxiliary connection. So at this point you've got two options. You can actually continue installing this thing as ASL Automedia would have intended, and that is to take this 3.5mm auxiliary plug, pull it through the dashboard, and then there's actually a hole behind the tissue box holder here in the center console. So this thing actually has a threaded connection, and you could actually install a 3.5mm auxiliary plug into the back of that slot. As I do actually have a tissue box installed in this slot, I'm not going to go down that route. And as I mentioned earlier, I want to try and use my existing Bluetooth module. So if you want to follow what I'm doing here and install Bluetooth as I am, I'll leave a link in the video description to a Bluetooth module which you can purchase in addition to the ASL Automedia auxiliary box. The only downside with purchasing that Bluetooth module is it does have that auxiliary connector, which we have to cut and then splice on a 3.5mm male plug. But that's really easy. It's just a red, white and black wire which we need to splice together, so shouldn't have any problems with that. So here is a closer look at the Bluetooth module which I purchased off eBay. So what we're going to do here is cut off the white auxiliary socket, and then we also need to wire this module into the positive and negative power. I would recommend referring to your ASL Automedia loom because the additional male power connector which they provide is a perfect place to splice in your positive and negative wiring. Now that you've connected the power to the Bluetooth module, we can now cut off the auxiliary socket. If we cut the wire straight up the middle and then strip off the black rubber sheathing, it's going to reveal a selection of wires. We've got the red right audio channel, we've got the white left audio channel, and then the two unsheathed wires need to be rolled together to create the ground. I managed to get hold of a donor 3.5mm plug and started stripping off the wiring. But I noticed the wiring on this plug is extremely thin and it was going to be really difficult to splice it in to the existing wiring. So I decided I'm going to hardwire this thing in properly, and I decided to cut the end off the ASL Automedia 3.5mm plug. So after cutting the cable, stripping off the rubber sheathing and then untwisting some of the plastic protective layers, you'll get a closer look at the wiring that's inside. And whilst the colouring is a little bit different, the logic here is exactly the same. The solid colour, which is the blue, is the right channel,
Anything with white on it is the left, and then the unsheathed wire is the ground. So all we need to do really is join these wires to the wires coming out of the Bluetooth module, solder them together, and then protect them with some rubber heat shrink. So I'm going to strip all of the wiring back, slip on some rubber heat shrink ready to go, and then solder 2 of these solid wires together, which in this case is red to blue. Once the solder has cooled down and solidified, you can slide the heat shrink over the top and then shrink it over the connection. We then need to join the white wires together and then do the same thing with the ground circuit as well. I've put heat shrink over the 2 left and right channels, and the ground circuit is going to be shielded by an additional piece of heat shrink, which I'm going to slide down and shrink over the top of the entire connection.
Alright, so my soldering skills are not going to win any awards ever, but they are functional and they will hold, so that's really all I'm after. So now that we've got our Bluetooth module connected into the existing auxiliary module, we should be able to turn on the ignition and connect our phone to the Bluetooth. Now I just heard it connect, so we should be able to now play a song. Look at that, perfect. Awesome. You know, Bluetooth is never going to be as good a quality as a proper wired auxiliary connection, but really when you're driving, you know, you're on the road, got a lot of road noise in the car as well, so I don't think you're especially going to notice the sound quality difference when you're in motion. So I really enjoy having the full wireless connection that Bluetooth allows. So now that I've confirmed that this is all working, I can now go and zip tie all of the wiring up under the dash so we can set it and forget it. Because really, every time we jump into the car now, we can simply fire up our phone on Bluetooth to play our music. No connections necessary, physical ones anyway. Then I guess the last thing is to get the car out on the road and make sure that there's no audio feedback or background noise on our audio track.
All you need to do is tuck some of the wires up under the dash and make sure nothing is flapping around.
Alright guys, so we're back in the car, everything's wired up, ready to go, so it's time to test it out. In case you're wondering why the audio sounds a little bit different, it's because I've got a personal voice recorder wedged down here in the front seat to try and give you guys as good of an indication as I can as to what this system sounds like. Now there will of course be some sound loss because it's going from the media through the speakers into that microphone and then finally onto your device. So what you're going to hear is not a perfect representation, but it's probably about as close as I'm going to get. So let's turn on the stereo here, and then we'll switch it to auxiliary. So now we can grab our device and fire up Spotify. I've just got the MotoringBox playlist loaded here, so it's full of royalty-free music tracks which I use in my videos, and more importantly, it means I'm not going to get hit with a copyright infringement. So let's try one of these. Sound quality, can't complain, it sounds fantastic. And if we switch back to the radio, if anything, it's probably a little bit louder than the radio, but of course I can turn down the volume on my device to get it to the level that I want it to be. So let's go for a drive and we'll see if it still sounds good when we're underway. So far so good. Turn the volume up a little bit. Tell you what, I don't know if you can hear me, but this is really a night and day difference as to how it sounded before with just the Bluetooth device by itself. I had to turn it up to probably volume 20 to get the same level of volume that what I'm getting right now on volume 5. So, you know, that ASL Automedia box is really doing a fantastic job. And you know, I can't really hear that whine, you know, that audio feedback that's generated through the electrical system that rises and falls with the engine RPM. I think it's really doing a great job cutting out all of the background noise from the audio. So yeah, that's it guys. If you want to get Bluetooth or even just auxiliary audio through your BA or BF Falcon, you have to absolutely get that ASL Automedia box. It does cost a little bit more than some of the adapters you can find on eBay, but you know, you can't go past the end result. It's really stunning audio. It sounds like, you know, what this car should have came with from factory if it was built when Bluetooth was actually around, which it wasn't. But anyway, so yeah, if you enjoyed this video guys, let me know. If you've got any questions about the ASL Automedia box or how I wired up the Bluetooth module, hit me up in the comments below and I'll be happy to help. Otherwise, I'll see you next time.